Apple's latest iPhones on sale today, coming as the mega cap company faces mounting concerns around demand in China. Joining us now, Dan Flax, senior research analyst at Neuberger, Berman. Separate issues, I guess, but makes a difference on what happens to the stock from here, Dan. What will the reception for the phones? I hear that the 15 is amazing.
Good morning, Joe. Great to be with you. The iPhone 15 Pro and the Pro Max have changes to the industrial design. The titanium makes them notably lighter than their predecessors. You're also seeing improvements in the silicon, the camera, which helps drive better gaming, photography, and video experiences. And so I think that those people who have phones that are 2, 3, 4 years old will certainly see quite a significant improvement relative to what they have today. To your question on China, I think China remains a risk in terms of the geopolitical and the trade tension, but the Chinese customers want the best. Apple has done well in the country over many, many years by investing, empowering Chinese developers, and I think they have good opportunities there to grow over time.
Would you say that something like Taiwan or, you know, the worst case scenarios for you? Do you spend a lot of time thinking about those when you're talking about whether you buy a stock or not, or is that really like a black swan? I mean, if that happens, all bets are off. But it's not zero, the chances of something like that hitting.
We spend a lot of time assessing the implications of supply challenges that could be a factor in the case of in the case of Taiwan. But the key, and we're seeing this from Apple and all other companies, they're looking to diversify. You're obviously seeing increased semiconductor investment here in the United States. For Apple, you're seeing them continuing to invest more in India. And so I think Taiwan would an issue there would be a challenge broadly, globally. But with each passing year, companies like Apple are going to be able to mitigate the impact. Ultimately, for Apple, it's about the innovation of the product cycle.
If you couldn't sell into China, though, let's say the worst case scenario happened with where something like, you know, we don't do any business, we try not to do any business with Russia right now. If something happened with Taiwan, I assume that would be similar. I mean, that would be material if you lost sales to China.
So China's about 19% of revenue for the company. So if that went away, you'd have the impact on the earnings and the free cash flow for the company, and that would be negative for the stock. I think after that were to happen and the market would price that in, the question on a go-forward basis would be how well could Apple continue to do in its existing markets, the United States, obviously Europe, and newer markets like India, which are very, very early for Apple, could become significant over time. Yes, it would have to grow off that lower number, but I still would expect them to innovate.
Yeah, Dan, I would say, look, it's probably not as big of a deal in terms of what they're going to lose, just based on what we've heard to this point. If Taiwan happens, it's a different story, though, because not only would they be losing the market, they'd be losing the manufacturing capabilities, I would assume.
That's right. Manufacturing would be impacted. But for example, partners like Taiwan Semiconductor and others who've been investing in different geographies, with time, I think they would be able to scale that production. Clearly, all of the competitors, not just Apple in the smartphone market and the other markets, would see the impact. And so broadly speaking, we'd have to see how some of that evolves. So it is a risk.
Can't believe Apple couldn't figure out how to do this chip and get rid of Qualcomm. It's an interesting story in the journal today. So they're not perfect. I guess it's not.
Nobody's perfect.
Some of this stuff is hard. It's hard work, right?
Joe, technology and investments in silicon are incredibly challenging. Qualcomm has a lot of intellectual property. We'll see how Apple does with the modem over time.
Thousands of engineers hired, thousands to try to figure that out. God, thank God for engineers. Whenever I drive across a bridge, I'm glad a journalist didn't design it.